Hello everyone, welcome to High-Tech Programming. Please don't forget to like our videos and subscribe. Now throughout this week I'll be introducing a new type of data type called lists and a new concept called loops. Lists will give us the ability to store large sets of data, while loops will allow us to return sections of our code. Today we'll be going through understanding list data types, how and why to use for loops, how and why to use while loops, understand how to work with lists, and creating a hangman together. Now let's dive into lists very quickly. As you can see here, this is a list. So let's open the image and see what's going on. Now if you want to create a list, you declare a variable first, and then put the equal sign, and then you start it with a square bracket and you end it with a square bracket. Now, a list can take any data, any kind of data, any kind of data. So it can take an integer, it can take a string, a float, or even a set, a list. So a list can be inside another list. It can also take a boolean, but in this example, we're not covering this one. So, and in order to access any of these items, we use the index form. An index is very common theme in is a very common theme in programming, and in order to access the L of 0, you just type in L of 0 20, L of 1 Jessa, and L of 2 35.75, and L of 3 is 30, 60, and 90. Now features of Python lists are ordered, maintain the order of the data insertion. Changeable list is mutable and we can modify items inside of each list. Heterogeneous list can contain different types and contains duplicate. So it can also contain duplicate types of data. So if we want to type in another Jessa, we can just put in a comma right here and then type in Jessa with a single quotation marks. Now, we try to explain everything in just one sentence. Let me just open up my Replit website and then go to replit.com/languages/python3 and let's get coding. Now I want to show you the name of the website, so I'm just gonna do this and then show it to you. replit.com/languages/python3. Press enter, that's it. Now let's go back to our screen. Alright, so let's say we have a list, okay? So L equals 1 and 3.4, 3.5, true, another list that says 0, 1, and 2, and 3. Alright, now let's first print this list. Let's print L and see what happens. As you can see, it printed out exactly L. Now, as we talked about indexes, now let's try to print the first item. So pause the video now and try to print the first item in that list. Now let me try this. So L of 0 is equal to 1, so it should put out 1. Now 0, 1, 2, 3, we count in programming from 0, so we start by 0, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Then if we want to print this list, then we should type in L3. If we want to access a list within a list, then we should type in L3 of 1, it should return 1. And there you have it. Now let's say L3 of 2 should return 3. Now let's say we want to change this list. So let's say we want to print L first, and then say L of 1 is equal to 6.5 instead of 3.5. Let's print this out and see what happens. As you can see, the second item was changed into 6.5. So this is how you change items inside your list. Now let's add another item to this list. Let's say we want a string called Jessa. Let's print this out first. Now you can see that Jessa is printed at the end of each list. Now let's say we want to access the index 1 of the word Jessa. Now pause the video and try to access index 1 of the word Jessa inside the L list. Alright, so let's do this. Let's say print L of now 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, and then of 1 because E is at 0, 1, second index, which is equal to 1. Now let's play this, and it should print out Jessa. Sorry, and it did. If we wanted to print out Jessa, then we just type in L4. It's just going to turn Jessa. Now this list contains different types of data. We have an integer, we have a float, we have a boolean, we have a list, and a string. A string can be indexed again. Another list inside of this can be indexed again. However, a boolean, a float, and an integer cannot be indexed again. So if we have a large number that we want to index inside, we should just use a string instead of an integer and use quotation marks. Now what about variable storage? When variables are declared, the value assigned is put into a location in memory. These locations have a specific reference ID. It's not often you'll need to check the ID of a variable, but for educational purposes, it's good to know how storage works. We would use the ID function to check the storage location in memory for a variable. So let's say, A is equal to 5 and 10. Now, what if we want to print the ID of A? ID of A. Let's see what happens. Now, the ID of A is a very large number, and it's located inside the memory at this exact number. So quite often you won't get to actually use this, but quite often, but it's the ability to check the storage location in memory for a variable. So the large number displayed here represents the location in memory. When a list is stored in memory, each item is given its own location. Changing the value using index notation will change the value stored within that memory block. Now, if a variable value is another variable like so, A is equal to 5 and 10, B is equal to A, changing the value at a specific index will change the value for both lists. Let's see what happens here. Now let's say that B is equal to A. So as we said, B is equal to A. And then print A now let's try this. Print and then A colon something T, which stands for tab, B dot format A and B. Now let's print location A0 is /T location B0 is dot format open parentheses ID of A of 0 and then ID of B of 0 and then close it off. Now A of 0 is equal to 20. This means that we are redeclaring the value of A0 also changes B of 0. Now print A is, and then tab B is, and then dot format A and B. Now let's see what happens here. Now we made a typo in ID right here, so let's clear this out. And as you can see, A is equal to 5 and 10, B is equal to 5 and 10. Location of A0 in the memory is this one. Location of B0 in the memory is this one. So A has now turned into 20 and 10. A is turned into 20 and 10. Because we already replaced A of 0, B was also replaced. So the first is printing out the values. The first value will be output will be printing out the values of both list variables to show that they have the same values. The second print statement will output the location in memory for each list first item. Then lastly, after we change the value of the first item within our A list, the value in our B list also changes. This is because they share the same memory location. So that's very interesting. If they share the same memory location, then the value of B will also change. B of 0 will also change.